Hello everyone and welcome to the Salesforce Development and Deployment webinar with Gearset and the Welkin Suite. My name is Vladimir, I am Head of Product at the Welkin Suite and Head of Salesforce Department in the SAF team company. And today we will talk to you together with Jason from Gearset.
Hi, I'm Jason. I'm the customer lead here at Gearset. My role is to make sure that everyone who uses the app gets the absolute best experience possible and can experience themselves just how quick and easy deployments can be on Salesforce with Gearset.
Cool, and we will see this today, I guess. So in the webinar for the next 45 minutes, we will start with a brief overview of who are the Welkin Suite and who are the Gearset. Then we will show you how you can easily develop using the Welkin Suite, and then you will see how you can easily deploy your code and metadata with Gearset. And at the end, we'll have about 10 minutes of Q&A session. And in case if you have any questions as we go, just feel free to ask them in the questions pane and we'll try to answer them as soon as we can or at the end of the webinar. So let's start, and first of all I'll introduce you the Welkin Suite. It's an IDE that was created for Salesforce development especially. We started working on it about 3 years ago when we understood that existing tools does not meet our expectations and they does not benefit our Salesforce development team. They just waste their time trying to fight with tools. So the Welkin Suite is an IDE built for Windows and for Mac as well. On Windows we are using the Microsoft Visual Studio shell, and on Mac we are using the mono-develop IDE shell. So you should be familiar with the tools or you have at least seen them. And our main goals are to provide you the best experience, the best performance in both like the IDE itself and as well as your common day-to-day tasks. So we are trying to make your life easier and more productive.
Gearset's a tool designed to make release management on the Salesforce platform ingeniously simple. So the core of the app is the ability to quickly see the configuration differences between your environments, whether that's metadata that's stored in source control or directly in your Salesforce orgs. When you run a comparison, Gearset will then show the differences in the XML line level with automatic change highlighting, removing the need for the manual text diffs or change tracking documents entirely. Once you've seen what's different between your environments, you can then deploy out those changes with just a few clicks, and Gearset automatically identifies object dependencies and include components you need in your package. This adaptive dependency analysis is one of the defining features of Gearset, which really sets it apart from any other deployment tool on the platform. Just like the Welkin Suite, we also believe in automation wherever possible to remove those slow manual tasks. Automation takes several forms in Gearset, including tracking org changes with daily snapshots and change reports, easy deployment rollback, testing automation and code coverage tracking, and continuous integration, which you'll see a little bit later on in the webinar. All of these automation tasks are managed via the app's interface, with no coding, XML editing, manual package creation, or configuration of Jenkins required. Gearset was also designed to integrate with your existing development flow, and you'll see in the demo shortly how easy it is to make some changes using an IDE such as the Welkin Suite, and then push out those changes into your orgs with Gearset to test them with your end users. And with that, I will hand back to Vladimir so he can show you how easy development can be with the Welkin Suite.
Cool, sounds very cool. So let's start. Okay, so here right now you can see the Welkin Suite UI, and our main idea of the UI is to provide you as many information as possible. So later you can decide what exactly information you'd like to see, in what way you'd like to see, and also not only information, but also all the most important and crucial for you actions should be available in the UI, so you won't leave it for another application, or so you won't switch to the browser, for example. And of course, your UI or layout of the tool should be configurable so you'll feel comfortable in your environment. For example, right now I have more Java style layout here, but me being a .NET developer in the past, I'd prefer to have it a bit different way. So I move Solution Explorer to this part, test results somewhere here, no, let it be here. Okay, at least in this way it's more comfortable for me and I feel better. So what panels do we have else here except of Solution Explorer and test results? We have code coverage information, which shows you information about unit tests, about your classes, triggers, and code coverage about them. We have debug logs panel, we have information about your lightning bundles here, we have version control. So lots of different information in lots of different panels, and you can just do whatever you'd like with them and consume only needed information. So I guess I'll spend some minutes on the Solution Explorer because it is a bit different comparing to any other IDEs or like development tools for Salesforce. To be honest with you, we don't like the way how the project structure is done in Salesforce. We don't like that flat structure where you have your classes, like layouts, objects, pages, folders with hundreds, at least, files in each of them. We'd prefer to allow you to create your custom folders and organize the project like in the way it will be most comfortable for you and the way you'll spend less time. For example, I have created a custom folder called demo where I have all the files which I'll potentially need for my today's demo. I have created separate subfolders there where I've gathered some of my unmanaged packages. And you can also notice that I have here mixed different types of files. So I have Visualforce page with Apex class, with something else, no, just Visualforce pages and classes. So in this way you can easily organize, for example, your Visualforce pages with their controllers, with components, add to them unit tests, maybe static resources. All of this in the same folder, so you don't need to scroll here and there in the Solution Explorer. Just easily find the needed folder and start working with it. Okay, so let's proceed. And I've opened this project, I've downloaded it from the Git repository and started working with it. Or, in case if you don't use Git or if you don't like Git, you can just create a new fresh project from your organization, enter your credentials, and jump in and stop working. So now let's move on to some changes and kind of development, and let's imagine some pretty simple but very common situation. For example, you have a bug or issues that was reported for you by your customers or by QA engineer, or for example, you have found it yourself. And me being a fan of TDD, I have previously created a small unit test which just tests that issue, and right now it is red, so it's failing. In order to get to this unit test, I will open test results panel, navigate to my test class, and I see this failed unit test method. Here in the panel I see a message from Salesforce like assertion exception and stack trace. In case if I want to fix it, I need some more details, so I press the open log button and I will see the debug log opened immediately here in our own debug logs viewer. And what do we see here? In the upper side we have hierarchical tree-like view of your execution flow, which is very helpful for situations when you have lots of nested calls, lots of triggers, or very complex code in general. It's very easy to find something interesting here in the tree view. Click on it and you'll get navigated to it in the regular text view. Once you find something interesting, you just switch to the text view and proceed working with the regular text viewer logs. In addition, here we also have some pretty simple but very useful color highlighting of different types of events. For example, you see that user debugs are green and pretty obviously exceptions are red. It's also very nice to see any exceptions in the code map which is shown on the right side. You can easily notice all the red items and navigate to them. Another way to find something interesting in your log file, in case if it's not, like in my case, 150 lines of code, if it's like 5,000 or 10,000 of lines, you can just press this filter button, select none, and then just select whatever you'd like to see in your log file. Done. And once you found an interesting place where you need to investigate something or to fix something, I suggest you to use one of my favorite features. It's one of the smallest features in the Welkin Suite, but I really love it. It saves me a lot of time in my usual development work when I do something in Salesforce. I can just right-click on any entry in the log file and select Go to Source. This will lead me exactly to that line in the source code which has thrown this exception in my case. And if this won't be a short demo of 15 minutes, or if it would be some more complex situation, some more complex bug, I'd show you our own retrospective debugger, which helps you to investigate any complex issues or just to understand how your code works. In my case, it's a very simple issue and we are working of time, so I'll do this without the debugger. Right here we see that our assertion expects 7, and we are calling some method and passing here parameter 6. So I right-click on the method, press Go to Definition, and I see that it returns exactly the same number that it received. And I guess that the issue is not in this class, but in the unit test, because in Apex doc I see the description that it should return the same value it received. So I close this method, I fix my unit test, do some changes, so I want to add some notes that it was fixed by me right now. So I use our feature to generate Apex doc header, write some description here, for example, save the file, and then I use one another small but anyway time-saving feature from the Welkin Suite. I'll go to the build menu and select build and run tests. This option will send this file to Salesforce. It will detect if any tests were changed as a part of this, I'd say, deployment, and if any were changed, it will immediately execute them. So I press build and run tests. We see our build process started. It took 3 seconds to save changes to Salesforce, and we immediately see the results in the test results panel. So I don't need to switch to browser, don't need to go to Salesforce UI. I just immediately see that my unit test is right now green, so I'm absolutely happy. And once I've done this change, I guess I need to commit it to the Git so my teammates would see it. So I switch to the version control panel. I'm right now on the changes tab, so I see what was changed by me. I see that it was a class itself. Okay, it was a log file that I have downloaded. I'll just exclude it. And the project file itself. Okay, I'm happy. Just write some commit message. And press commit. But before I proceed and go on, I'll show you some more cool things in the Welkin Suite. So even that we are focused mostly on the coding development, like Apex, Visual Force, Lightning development, HTML, CSS, we also started, pretty recently started to work in the direction for declarative development, and we already have some cool and nice features in this direction. So I'll show you them. In our SObjects editor, you have an option to modify your SObjects, their fields, directly in the XML file if you know it good and if you prefer to do it this way. However, if you don't like to work with the XML file, you can easily open our graphical UI and modify your fields or create new ones just from here. Another thing that saved me a lot of time in the recent deployments, it was a field level security editor. This editor allows you to easily configure FLS for different profiles, for different fields at the same time. You can just easily change your FLS very quickly. You have lots of different quick actions, lots of filtering options, so lots of small and useful stuff which is built to save some of your time. And really the same approach we have used for the layouts tab. So it just allows you to add or remove any fields from the layouts. Okay, so let's move on and get back to our Git. So you might know that the Welkin Suite does not support all the metadata types which are available in Salesforce right now. So in my project I have included only classes, pages, like 5 or 10 different types of metadata. However, if you store your project in the Git repository, it should be very helpful to have the whole metadata in the Git repository. To do this, I spent about 20 or 40 minutes of my time just to build a very simple Ant task which retrieves some of the metadata types from Salesforce. And also I built a very small 4-line bat file which executes this Ant task. In order to start it, I don't need to switch anywhere. I just open the Welkin Suite in the Tools menu. I've created a quick shortcut to execute this Ant task. So I press Retrieve Other Metadatas. It starts my Ant task. It starts to download something. Let us check. Okay, in 3 seconds it downloaded something, so I press any key, and I see that it downloaded me app menus. Maybe it was created, or maybe I have just not included it in my Git repository previously. So all the metadata that was downloaded in such a way should be included in the Git repository. So I do another commit. And press commit button. Now I need everything to appear on the remote, so JSON would be able to show the magic of Gearset. I switch to the sync tab. I see 2 of my commits. If I want to show details of what exactly was changed, I can double click on each file, and I see a built-in diff viewer which will show me what was changed as a part of this commit. Okay, I'm happy with these changes, so I get back to sync, press push, enter my login. And submit. Nope. more. Nice. I forgot my credentials, but I have them saved in another tool. So just give me a second, and I will push these changes. Okay, I was not able to push them using the Welkin Suite because I don't remember my credentials. Nice. But I've pushed this using another like Git client, so all the changes should be now on the remote repository. So Jason is now able to show us all the magic of the Gearset.
Thanks for that, Vladimir. Hopefully you can all see my screen now on the Gearset app. So I'm going to start this Gearset demo by picking up exactly where Vladimir left off after his commit of that metadata into source control. So what we're going to do with Gearset is we're going to run a comparison between that repository that we've just pushed those changes into, you can see here on the left, and we're going to push those changes out into a Salesforce org on the right here so we can actually do some testing with our end users. Now, when you run a comparison in Gearset, you start by specifying the source and target locations for your metadata. So this can be two different Salesforce orgs to each other, any developer, sandbox, or production environment. Or in this case, we're going to run a comparison from our source control repository out to a target Salesforce org. So I've selected the repository and the branch I want to use here, and I've selected my org that I want to push to from my saved connections. Now, if I want, I can hit compare now to kick off the comparison straight away. Or what I also want to do is set a custom deployment filter here. So what this does is allow me to specify which metadata types I want Gearset to retrieve when running the comparison. So I have a little bit more control over which metadata is going to be deployed. So now I've selected my Apex filter here, I'm going to hit compare now to kick off the comparison. What Gearset now does in the background is it's logging into your source and your target. All of this is done via OAuth, so you don't have to worry about Gearset having access to any of your credentials or your Salesforce orgs. Gearset then downloads the metadata from your org using the Salesforce metadata API. And once it's downloaded, it actually starts to do a comparison on it, so it can show you what the differences are between these source and target environments. Once you get the comparison complete, you have the results shown on the table view like this. So in the top half of the screen here, we can see there's that Apex class, the method calls, which has been modified. And if I actually look in the lower half of the screen here in the diff viewer, I can see exactly what those modifications are. So there's the description here, which is modified by Vladimir during the webinar. And a little bit further down, there's the change to the assert there in the test. So this I can see very easily is what's the difference between my source here, which is my repository, and the Salesforce org that I want to push this out to. This gives me a really easy way to get that insight into what changes have been made in my orgs. If there were any other developers doing work on this environment, I could see what they've been up to. It just helps me avoid stepping on each other's toes and making sure deployments go as smoothly as possible. So what I want to do is, now I've seen these changes and I want to push them out, I can simply select this object to include it in my deployment package, and I'm going to hit next. What Gearset is now doing is checking for any other missing dependencies or components I might want to include in my deployment package. So in this case, because it's a very simple Apex class we're just deploying out, there aren't any other missing components, and we're taken straight through to this pre-deployment summary. So you can see here we've got the list of the objects we're about to change. You have the summary of your source and target, just so you can be sure exactly what changes you're pushing. And down the bottom here, if you want, you can add in deployment notes. So I will call this demo deployment for webinar. These deployment notes get carried through to the reports that are generated after the deployment completes, so you have a more complete audit trail. And if you're actually pushing changes into a source control repository, then we use these for your commit message. Now, at this point, if you want, you can use Gearset to create and download your actual deployment package. So this will be the valid package with your package XML and your metadata contained within it. And if you even have destructive changes, so you've got a deletion you want to push through, then those will be included in there as well. You can also export this to Excel if you want a CSV summary. You can kick off the deployment right away, so this will immediately push this change out to your target org. If you want, you can do things like specifying tests that you want to run, or if you're pushing up to something like a sandbox or a developer org, you can force tests not to run. But actually, in this case, what I want to do is run a validation, which I'll just kick off now. So the validation is what's called a check-only deploy in Salesforce. So what Gearset does is it builds your package, uploads it to your Salesforce org, and asks Salesforce to run any tests on it, but doesn't actually apply any of the changes. So this lets you test the validity of your package prior to release, and it's also a great way if you want to test something prior to a scheduled maintenance window, or just be confirming that what you're deploying is about to be valid. You can see here that this package has been through validation, so I've got the message here, the components that were run, any tests that were run on it as well. Now that it's been validated, I have two options for deployment. I can deploy manually, kick it off straight away, or if you want, you can also take advantage of a little bit of automation here by scheduling this deployment for a later date. So to do this, all I would do is choose a date, so let's say tomorrow, and a time, say 11 p.m. during a maintenance window. And then when this deployment completes, I want to send me an email, and actually I also want to include my team so that the rest of them get the notification that this release has gone out. Now, if you click Save here, Gearset will create this job and automatically schedule this for deployment at that date. What I actually want to do for the sake of the demo is deploy this change out right away. So I'm just going to hit Deploy Now. And what Gearset does is now uploading this package to your target org, queuing the deployment with Salesforce, and deploying those changes out. Now, because we've been through the validation first, I can be extremely confident this deployment will succeed because we've already been through that validation stage. And you can see here, this is a very simple change, only took a few seconds to deploy. And we have this Apex class now, which we modified in the Welkin Suite. We then committed it to source control, and that's now been pushed out into our target org so we can actually test that with some end users. I've actually just got an email as well that this deployment is completed, so you can see that in the top right. We have our deployment notes, which have been included here, so I can see that for my reference, and some key information about the deployment here. Now, if I want to, I can download the full report here of this deployment as a PDF. So if I open this up, you'll see here that I have the deployment successful, I have my source and my target orgs, I have the objects that were deployed, deployment time, those notes, and then the list of the actual components that were included as well. So these reports give you a really good overview, which you can share with colleagues, or if you have a change tracking system you want to attach these to, they can be used there as well. So this is obviously a great way to manually push those changes out once you've created them and you want to stage them in your orgs. But we talked a little bit earlier about using some of the automation in Gearset to help remove some of these manual tasks and speed things up for you. So what we're actually going to do now is we're going to jump across and create a continuous integration job in Gearset so that any future changes that we commit to that source control repository will be automatically deployed out to that target org for staging. Now, the way we do this is I jump to the CI jobs tab in the app, and I'm going to click Add New Job. What I do here is I start off by giving the job a name. So we'll call this Welkin Webinar Job. I then choose the source environment for my metadata. So this can either be a Salesforce org, or in this case, actually, I'm going to select my GitHub account because that's where we're pushing those changes. I then choose the repository from the list, and I specify my branch. So in this case, we're going to leave it on master. So anytime that a future release is merged into the master branch, we want this automatically staged out as part of my release process. I then choose my target environment, which is going to be this staging org that we used before. And I now specify how often I want this job to run. So by default, it will be on a time basis. So every 4 hours here, for example, this job will automatically query this source branch for any changes and deploy those out to my target org. But actually, I want a little bit more control over this, and I know there are certain times when I'm not going to be making changes, and I don't want this job to just run unnecessarily. So actually, I'm going to specify here the run job when the source branch is updated, and this will create a webhook in a second when we save the job, which I can set up in GitHub, so you have an automatic triggering of a deployment when your source branch is updated for that full end-to-end LM automation. Next, I'm going to set up my notification settings. So Gearset allows you to get notified when things like deployments or continuous integration jobs run, so you can keep your team aware of what's happening. In this case, I'm not interested every time this job runs. I'm interested every time this job runs with a failure. And if that happens, I want Gearset to send me an email so I can get notified about it and start fixing it. And actually also, I want this posted into the chatter in my org so I have that background knowledge. Finally, I'm going to specify the metadata filter for this job to use. So for those of you who are familiar with Ant, you have a list of metadata components here which you can select in your deployment. This specifies which object types you want Gearset to retrieve as part of your CI job. So you have things like Apex classes here, you've got global value sets, you have profiles, permission sets, custom objects, and a few others as well. Now in this case, because I know that I've only been working on Apex classes and I want this job to just press new Apex, I'm actually going to use that filter that we used when we ran the manual comparison called Apex. And you can see here that that just has a few components selected here for this job to monitor. If you want, you can also set jobs to monitor and deploy changes associated with managed packages. So you can specify those here. I'll just click all. And what Gearset will then do is retrieve those components as part of the package and deploy those as well. Finally, if you want, you can specify the API version to use. By default, Gearset will automatically identify the highest common version between the two of them. But if you want to specify, so for example, we're working on v39 here, then you can do that. When I click Save, Gearset now creates the job. And you can see here it's providing me with the information with my payload and my shared secret to set up this webhook in GitHub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my payload URL. I'm going to jump across to GitHub. You can see here we're in the Welkin webinar repository. Under the settings and the webhooks. Obviously, the webhook setting depends a little bit depending on the source control provider you're using. So we support not just GitHub, but also GitLab, Bitbucket, VSTS. Click Add Webhook. You can see here I've got my payload URL to enter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that here from my Gearset, drop that into the page URL, leave the content type as the standard. I then have my shared secret to enter. So again, I'm going to grab that from Gearset, bring that across and drop that into my shared secret. I'm going to leave this with just the push event, set this as active and click Add Webhook. So what you've done now is you've created this webhook in GitHub here. You can see that's been created. I'm going to click Finished in Gearset and you can see that job is currently sitting there as status of pending. So now, anytime anyone pushes a commit into this master branch in my repository here, GitHub will automatically ping out a message to Gearset and that will trigger a deployment to push across any new Apex and automatically stage it in my staging org. So this completely removes any need for that manual steps and just makes the automation incredibly easy and simple to set up. You can see here I've also got a few previous jobs that I've set up between orgs. So continuous integration jobs, just like deployments, we track your full deployment history. So if you want to, you can jump into the history for any job to see any previous runs. And just like for a manual deployment, that history contains information like the number of objects that were deployed. You can grab the PDF reports. You can grab reports of those as a CSV file, and you can grab the package as well. So you have that full history maintained throughout the entire process. Finally, if you have a CI job and you want to run it on demand, so you have, for example, a webhook, or you want to take a deployment prior to a big release, you can also click Run Now, and you'll have the live status reporting there as this job kicks off. So you can see here, this is now starting to run a comparison and download the metadata between these orgs. So that gives you a quick overview of how to do comparison and deployment with Gearset, and then how to set up that continuous integration for the full automation. I'm briefly going to touch on one or two other features in the app before we jump back to the Q&A. The first one is something that goes hand in hand with the CI for the automation, which is called our org change monitoring. Now, the idea behind this is sometimes you might have people making changes directly in an org, which fall outside of your user release process. And you want to make sure that you don't accidentally overwrite those changes next time you come for a scheduled deployment. So with the change monitoring, you can create a job and Gearset will take snapshots of your org's metadata on a daily basis, and that can also be run on demand as well. And it'll then show you the comparison differences between those snapshots. So you have a day-by-day change history for any org, not only what changes were made, but you can see who made them, and then you can actually jump into that full line-by-line diff view to see what they were. So as an example here, I have a production environment which I'm monitoring. I know it hasn't been changed in the last day because it's currently showing as identical. But if I want to see more information about this org's change history, I can jump in there. You can see on the days where this org is identical, and some days here where people have been making modifications to that org. And if I want to, I can jump into the comparison to actually see what those changes were, who made them, and see the line-by-line diff to actually understand, are these something that I might want to pull back into my source control system? Are these things that I'm happy to override to my next deployment? Or do I need to go and talk to this person to understand why these changes have been made? If you want, you can also perform deployment rollback from your history of monitoring jobs and even download the snapshot of your org as a zip file. The final thing I want to show you is talking about history there. So Gearset is designed to not only make deployments easy, but also make reporting and audit trail extremely easy as well. So every deployment you run in Gearset is stored in your history. If I jump across here under the Deployments tab into the Deployment History, this will show me a list of every single deployment that's been run in the app. I can see here the whole history of deployments between orgs and source control. And for any of these deployments, you can grab the full reports. So you've got that PDF that we looked at earlier. If you want, you could also grab the CSV export and the original package just like before. So if you ever need to see what happened in a previous deployment, you can. There are also a couple of other features that you can do to make management and automation a little bit easier from here. One is the ability to do full or partial deployment rollback with Gearset, which you can do in just a couple of clicks. And we also have the ability to do cloning of packages. So if you want to apply the same set of changes that you've applied to one org down your release pipeline without building that package manually every time, then you can do a clone from there. So I'm going to stop there. That's a quick overview of, we've seen how to commit some changes into source control using the Welkin Suite, how to then pick that up and deploy them out to your orgs with Gearset, and then set up some simple automation with continuous integration and monitoring to check for any further changes to those orgs. And with that, I will hand you back to Vladimir, and we will move across to the Q&A.
Thank you. And so, questions and answers. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask them in the questions pane, and me and Jason will be happy to answer them, or in case if you won't fit in time, we'll answer them after the webinar to email or in some other way. So we have first question, I guess it's about Welkin Suite. So why when you ran the N script to commit to Git, did you have to do that? In general, I ran the N script not to commit to Git, but to download different metadata to the same project that I've created in the Welkin Suite. By default, Welkin Suite supports about 15 or 20 different metadata from the Salesforce. However, there is about 100 of them. For example, I don't know, your workflows, validations, your process builder flows, your visual flows, all the stuff is different metadata. And we do not support all of them, but it's very good to have everything related to your organization in the same Git repository. So I've executed that unscript to just download that once that Welkin Suite doesn't support. It's needed only when you want to commit something to the repository, and you can just do whatever you need during your day-to-day tasks. So you don't need to do this all the time, just before you commit this tool. Another question from Kate. Jason, can you see the questions or?
I can't, unfortunately, no, so you'll have to read them out for me.
Okay, so we have a question from Kate. Does Gearset support OSFDC component types?
Yes, so Gearset will support anything which can be deployed via the metadata API. So if any of you are familiar with using the full-stack migration tool or Ant, if it's deployable via that, then it's supported by Gearset, which is a significantly larger number of components than are supported by change sets within Salesforce. So generally, yeah, if you're working on it, you can deploy it.
Okay, and one more question to you. What is a partial rollback?
Good question. So the way rollbacks work in Gearset is once you run a deployment, we obviously have that saved in your history. When you click rollback, what Gearset does is it runs a comparison between a snapshot of your org, which was stored just prior to deployment. This happens automatically in the background. You don't have to do that manually. We'll then run that comparison between the snapshot and the org's currently live state. We'll show you the same diff results. So you get the line-by-line diff, you get the objects that are changed in that table, and then you can select which components you want to undo. So the process is very similar to running a normal deployment in that you can see exactly what components have changed. If you want to do a full rollback, you just simply select everything that's changed between that snapshot and the org's live state. But if you wish to select, just for example, a field level security setting on a profile that's changed that you accidentally moved across, you can select just that component and deploy it out. And that way you can do very, very specific deployments or rollbacks on just the components you're interested in.
Okay, thanks for the answer. We have lots of other questions, so I guess I'll try to go through some of Gearset related. So again, question for you, Jason. Does CI jobs support GitLab or only GitHub?
Yeah, that's another good question. I should have mentioned that in the demo. So we support GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, GitLab, and Bitbucket, as well as VSTS. You can also, if you wish, actually run deployments from a local folder on disk if you're running a comparison. You've got stuff checked out locally. So yes, we do support GitLab.
Cool, yeah, because we've had another question about VSTS, so you've answered this as well. Another one for you. Can Gearset zip up and deploy static resources?
Yes, and we can do more than that, actually. We can actually unzip a static resource during the comparison and show you the components within it. So it's for example, if you've got some code or even actually people include images sometimes within a zip static resource, when you run a comparison with that, Gearset will show you the static resource as a component. You can expand it out in the diff viewer and we'll show you the components within it. We'll then show you the diff between those components in source and target, and you can deploy just those across if you want.
Nice. Couple of another questions for you. Just give me a second. Yeah, one more related to metadata types. So when Salesforce exposes new types via API, how long does it take for you to support it?
We're generally very, very quick on that. So we've got a very good relationship with Salesforce. We're usually part of all of their preview programs and their beta testing for new features. We add support on a very regular basis into the app. So one of the advantages of Gearset being a hosted app, so it's all hosted on app.gearset.com, there's nothing to install in your orgs when you use it, is that we push out updates multiple times a day. So if there are any changes made to Salesforce, there are any new features that we're working on, we can respond very, very quickly on that. You don't have to wait for the next quarter's release, for example.
Nice, nice. And a couple more again for you. So could you tell a bit more about deployment of managed packages from developer org?
Yeah, so we support the ability to deploy managed packages. When you run a comparison and you saw that metadata filter, you can choose which components you want to include. One of those options is to include the managed packages. When you do that, what we'll do is we'll retrieve the components that are retrievable over the API. So the managed package object will appear. You obviously can't see the diff within that because those packages are protected, but we'll also be able to retrieve components associated with the package. So if that package has created some custom objects or changed some profiles, you'll be able to see those components in the diff and deploy them out just like any other metadata type.
Nice, nice. One more. So can Gearset deploy permission sets without including all the related objects fields? We've had a challenge with change sets and having to include everything if you want to migrate permissions. This is even more difficult when managing permissions for managed package objects or fields.
Yes, I believe the short answer to that is yes, we should be able to. With all these questions, the easiest way to try it out is actually to give a go with Gearset. So we offer a free 30-day trial. It being a hosted app, there's nothing to install, and we encourage everyone who's got an interest, sign up, give it a go. If you have questions, you can always let us know.
One more great question I really like, by the way, personally interested in your answer. So for CI with Gearset, if you set up for Apex changes as you showed, and Apex change depends on a new field added to the object, does the dependency get automatically added or will it fail?
That depends on the filter you've set up for your CI job. So if you have set the job to only monitor Apex, that won't get automatically included. But if you create a job which also monitors other metadata types, then we will automatically look for those changes and try and deploy them.
Cool. Okay, we have a couple of working questions, so I'll try to answer them. In the working ID is a permission overview editor similar to the profile editor I've showed that summarizes objects permissions across a set of permission sets. Right now, no, we are working on the permission sets editor. We're gonna release it this week or maybe next week, not sure yet. And once we're done with the permission sets editor, we are looking forward to implement some kind of security helper, which will try to grab together all the hierarchy, profiles, permission sets, and show you everything all together. We don't yet have any timeline for this, but it's in our backlog for sure, and we are going to do this in some future. Question about future features that we can expect from the suite. It's a good question. So right now we have a good plan till our spring release on May. We are moving towards it. You can find some details on our blog. However, right now our main goals are permission sets editor and everything related to permission sets. We have huge update for Apex code completion and code assistance functionality. We are rewriting it again, and there will be a lot of cool features included in it. We are also working on the improved writing support, so we're going to implement writing previewer, writing completion, and in general, we are not usually publishing our plans because they are changing all the time according to the requests from our users, according to the feedback from our users. However, we are releasing new versions each 2 or 3 weeks, so lots of new stuff is coming for sure. General question: if this webinar is going to be recorded and if the link will be sent to attendees? Yes, we'll do this. Maybe tomorrow we'll send the link to everyone with the recording of this webinar. How's the hotkey support in Welkin? I like the feature set, but I'm used to doing quick operations in Sublime Text 3. Great question. You can easily assign hotkeys to any actions you can do in the Welkin Suite. There's a lot of hotkeys by default, and we always provide you an option to assign your own. This is another way to do something. And we really encourage you to use hotkeys because they are much faster than the mouse. Good question. Welkin, do you support Git credential caching on Windows? Not yet, unfortunately not yet. Our Git integration, like we have it, it's pretty simple, and it's not yet ideal in our understanding. So we have lots of plans to implement it in a bit different way, but no, not yet. We don't have yet like any timelines yet. So this will be done, but at some time in the future, and I don't think that this will be in the next 2 or 3 months, maybe later. Okay, another question, can I get demo of both these products? I was just on a project where we were using AutoRabbit and I was very disappointed. So for Gearset, Jason says that they have free trial. Welkin Suite again has a free trial. And in terms of demos, I guess that me and Jason will contact you later.
Yeah, and if you, just to add on that, if you have any questions or you want to see a slightly more in-depth demo or anything, then just get in touch and we're happy to organize that. We're also happy to chat about how Gearset is generally considered to be a much better tool than AutoRabbit as well.
And the same for us as well. So if you have any questions or if you want to show it to your team or just to answer some questions for yourself, again, write us and we'll also be happy to help you. Okay, looks like this was all the questions. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. I hope you found that useful. As Vladimir said, if any of you have any questions about either Gearset or the Welkin Suite, then you can always let us know. Get in touch. You can email either us or you can use our in-app chat.
Thank you very much, guys, for your time and have a great rest of your day.